Hi there. Welcome to Legends Talk Live. I'm here with David Larkins of Chaosium.
Hello.
Hey, thanks again, David, for taking the time to join me tonight. And I'm looking forward to this conversation because it's something I've thought a lot about as I found Pendragon pretty late into my gaming, experience, let's say, hobby.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yep.
So, what was, just to kick us off, what is your role at Chaosium? Just for those that don't know you.
Yeah, sure. I'm the line editor of the Pendragon role-playing game, so yeah, I'm kind of in charge of the line, as the name implies.
Yeah, absolutely. And what was your kind of like first experience with King Arthur that you can recall, or maybe even there's all those passive things because it's really
Yeah,
baked into Western culture. But what was the one that like
yeah.
really caught your attention?
So the one that really got me, and is probably the reason I'm here talking to you today, is I saw a TV edited, very important, TV edited version of Excalibur when I was like maybe 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old. So just the visuals of that movie, it was so striking. And of course, like you say, I mean, you can't grow up in Western culture without getting some, at least not the Anglophone Western culture, without getting some level of osmosis of like the Round Table and Arthur and Lancelot and so forth. So I knew the basics of the story, but it was like I'd never seen it depicted like that before, and it just absolutely grabbed my imagination.
Yeah, I unfortunately did not catch the TV edited one. I put the VHS in,
Yeah. Well,
and
that happened to me a little later. So yeah, because I I thought it was a PG movie. No, it was not.
so I feel like and maybe this was where the popularity, had already existed in the 70s and 60s from various, you know, novels, from
Mhm.
movies, from Disney,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I feel like it was pretty commonplace and it was up there in like the mythology that you would just know and be super familiar with,
Hmm.
Um, maybe not all the details. Like I think
Sure.
it was kind of surprising to me watching Excalibur for the first time, being like, "Oh, there's a lot of drama here." Like, and I didn't know how to
Mm.
handle that. Right? I
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
expecting knights, doing heroic things, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, for
And
sure.
But the reason I wanted to chat about this tonight is I've noticed in the recent decades, there's been movies, series. Some of them are memorable, some of them less so. Some are by opinion. None of them quite hit that blockbuster appeal that, like I wonder if Lord of the Rings would have been as big as it is if it wasn't for the Peter Jackson movies, as
Sure.
far as like staying relevant in pop culture, right?
Right.
So
Right.
but what are your thoughts on like is the Arthur myth kind of fading a bit, or do you think it's trending down, or do you think it's right where it's always been?
Well, I think, yeah, you can't really deny that it's not as big of a force in pop culture as it was even in the 20th century. I mean, I think peak Arthuriana was probably like the turn of the 20th century, when you had like artists like Howard Pyle and N.C. Wyeth like doing those amazing illustrations and these different iterations of the legends, and new editions of Lemort d'Artour were coming out every few years, and then that influenced the subsequent generations of movie makers and comics artists. I mean, Prince Valiant, might still be running, but certainly ran for a very long time. And
Right.
Greg Stafford, the creator of the game, had a massive collection of like actual clippings from newspapers of Prince Valiant comics, that was a huge influence on him. And like you say, there was the Disney movie, and then there was Excalibur, and then yeah, it kind of fell off a little bit, and I think maybe it was kind of a victim of its own um sort of self mythologizing, as seen through the lens of like Hollywood and whatnot. The musical Camelot, and its
Right.
association with Kennedy's, and I think at a certain point it kind of got a little overexposed, and so we're still at a place here where, because of that, it hasn't really had a big resurgence. It's never going away, but
Right.
yeah, it is kind of on a, you know, eh, I wouldn't say it's on a downward trend, but it's kind of like on the down low. It's like
Yeah.
it's just kind of low key, right? Just not this massive cultural force like you would have found 60 or 70 years ago.
Do you think some of the things that cross my mind are, is can you have are the concepts of chivalry seen as corny today? Is
Yeah.
heroism seen as corny? Are we kind of more in a we like our grit like George R. R. Martin kind of, down in realistic sort of speak and by that there's almost like this moral relativity, like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like the gray story is a bit more, even though Arthur is full of mistakes. I
Oh
think,
yeah. Yeah,
right?
sure. I mean, it's a tragedy ultimately, and
Yeah,
and I think that you're exactly right. I think thanks to that kind of sanitized, 50s and 60s Camelot, Sword in the Stone, Hollywood Technicolor productions, people just kind of did start to associate Arthurian legends with this kind of squeaky clean, everyone's a paladin kind of thing. Chivalry is corny, like you say, and it's just the style right now that it's like anything set before the 19th century has to be all gray and brown and muted, right? So even though as you and I know, Middle Ages were
right.
extremely colorful. People love it's almost psychedelic the amount of color that people put on display in the Middle Ages. So, that speaks to a larger issue that's kind of one of my personal pet peeves is like, I would love not only to see a resurgence of Arthurian legends, but just accurate depictions of the Middle Ages. So,
Yeah, yeah. I can definitely understand that because I feel like even some of the concepts that are in there, and I know that concepts of chivalry and stuff are not they're not necessarily the way we look at the world today, and so
mhm,
maybe there's a lot of media that's moved away from hero focus. Like the protagonist might not be a hero at all, and a lot of our best media, like people call Breaking Bad a
mhm.
perfect series,
Right,
or almost
right,
or near perfect series. That's not about it's not about a guy that you want to be. Maybe, but like
right,
not in
right.
that way.
No,
You know,
yeah,
I wonder if there's like a modern cynicism that comes with that a bit, where it's like no one can quite be that way. But yet, I wonder. I'm sure Peter Jackson had the same trouble. Like,
mm,
I'm sure people are like, "Who wants to watch this? It's not relevant." No one wants to watch these heroes do this thing. It can't be done. It's too big.
yeah,
All the things that would probably be said about doing Lamort, like
yeah,
from start to finish. Is it and like, but we've never been better primed for that with like the series adaptations model would work really well for that rather than
yep,
trying to force it in like Excalibur had to do, or even making it a trilogy and
yeah,
watching people fall off slowly over those three movies, right? So,
yeah, right, right.
yeah.
Yeah, no,
What do you,
you're right. It is ripe for that sort of prestige television, extended series, kind of like what they're doing with the little Game of Thrones like sequel series. These little short, whatever, 12 episode or 15 episode runs.
exactly?
Yeah, and well, I'm kind of two minds. I think if people really wanted to lean into the cynicism, mentioning Breaking Bad kind of got me thinking about this. You could do a version of Lamort from Mordred's perspective, right? And just
That's neat.
yeah, because in a lot of ways, I feel like he actually typifies sort of like postmodern cynicism, because he's the one who's kind of like the chivalry thing is for the birds, and like y'all are stupid hypocrites, basically.
Absolutely.
But something we've leaned into with sixth edition of Pendragon is like, since the default setting is Arthur's early reign before things really start to sort of stagnate and then subsequently fall apart, we can really like depict that sort of idealism as a positive thing because I think everyone could use a little bit of idealism and hope these days. You know, there's a lot of um, there's a lot of turmoil and despair, and it kind of echoes in a certain way the anarchy in that sense. And you know, you have someone who comes along and is kind of like, we can be better, like we can make our society better. And whether or not that actually works out, that's a question for a few decades on. That's fine. We're not going to worry about that. But
It
you
might have
know,
been a failed experiment, but it was great when it
right?
lasted.
It was great while it lasted. Exactly. That was something I was excited about when we kind of realized, like, yeah, we can actually like we don't have to like run away from that. We can kind of lean into it a little bit. And I think honestly, if we saw more media doing that, I think people would respond to it.
Yeah, I had this thought as you were saying that during the pandemic, I was running one game and playing one game. So I
Mhm.
was running Pendragon for two different groups online, and I was playing in a Lord of the Rings RPG. It was like the 5e version of the One Ring kind of thing.
Right, right.
And the hope in both those games, as someone that plays a lot of different RPGs, plays a lot of gritty games, plays vampire, plays,
Sure.
but the hope in both those games during a time that was pretty hard,
Yeah.
like it hit me more than I thought it would as
Yeah.
I was playing or running those games. Like there was something cool and unique about having a hope that's not sort of grounded in a cynical take, but in like a actual leaning into the ideology that things could be better. I think that was cool.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And you know, I really liked the Green Knight movie, but it is also sort of typical of what we've been talking about, where it's very like muted and the color palette is very muted. It's a very kind of dark and cynical movie, really. So, which I know some people, that's why they didn't like it, because they felt like it didn't depict Gawain in a fair way. But,
Right.
that's the nature of the legends, is they're very malleable in that sense. So I really respected what the filmmakers did with it. But yeah, I would just love to see something that was a little bit more on the hopeful side and a little bit more like, yeah, it's okay. It's okay to have ideals that you're striving for, even if you fall short of them.
Yeah, the one thing I always found, and I still wrestle with today out of the Arthur myth, is the Mayday scenario.
Mm, yeah.
Depicting that in a game and not having your players take a modern ideological take to what that means or what that represents to do that or to be responsible for
Mm.
a Herod like activity.
Yeah.
you know that's the sort of thing we in like our modern world, that's the most, I mean, arguably always, but especially in the modern world, that's like one of the most heinous things you could ever do, right? And the only way I can think like to include that is to either make him sort of like like talked into it, like oops, or like not quite, or to make that be the thing he regrets. I mean, it links to Mordred, so it makes sense, but
Hmm.
it almost has to like stay with him in a way that you see some kind of redemptive quality, because in our modern take, we're not, I don't think the modern world, and this is just my take, but I don't think the modern world's as forgiving maybe as we were previously. I think, and when I say that, I realize we've used to torture people and do all kinds of heinous stuff we don't do now.
Sure.
But but I think there's a difference between that and like, we write people off pretty quick for a failure now,
Hmm.
and the vision is they can not be redeemed. Like they are what they've done, and
Yeah.
there's no redemption in that, right?
Right. Right. Right.
Um, hmm.
Yeah.
I don't.
No, I see what you mean. And it does bring up, I mean, that's exactly what we're sort of talking about is like, these stories are not, they're actually not about this sort of like squeaky clean chivalry paladin kind of thing. People make horrendous mistakes and then pay for it, and yeah, it was like the May Babies incident is the ultimate undoing of the kingdom. I mean, it takes, another 50 years to play out, but ultimately that is the origin of Mordred. And you know?
Yeah, that what makes Mordred Mordred, basically, right?
Yeah,
Like you,
exactly. And you know, the in Pendragon, the Grey Knight deals with that. You know, it's interesting because, you know, you're sort of trying to support Arthur in that story, but what you're ultimately trying to do is like help him defend himself against accusations of being a baby killer, you know. So I don't know if Larry DiTillio called it the Gray Knight, you know, for that reason because it is sort of shades of gray, right? But that's certainly one facet of that story, and it would be a difficult one to depict if you were to do one of these like you know prestige TV series, but you'd have to kind of trust your audience to go along with you, I guess.
even in a campaign, I feel like if you're playing like through Uther period to this,
Yeah,
you hit that point, everyone's gonna go, "Oh no, he's gonna be his father. Oh no."
yeah. Like, oh God, slow motion train wreck.
Yeah, we've been through this already.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the lead time, like how much greatness. It's almost like I think if you're playing through the whole Great Pendragon campaign,
Mhm.
or to really stick with players, there has to be something special about Arthur,
Yeah.
right? That they didn't see in the periods before that. So I haven't gotten there yet. And if my players are watching, don't worry, I may or may not. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. I'm actually figuring that out still. I'm
Mm,
curious, like to do that right though. I figured I really need to make Arthur likable,
mhm.
like not just friendly, but like morally likable, like Clark Kent from Kansas versus Alien Superman, right? Like need
Right,
to find a
right.
way to deliver him in a way that people can resonate with just being an all-around good guy,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That's, you know, Merlin is kind of there to be the fall guy as usual, and including with the May babies and stuff. I mean, you know, in your own campaign, you could say like, "Hey, Arthur didn't even know until after it had happened." You know, that was all Merlin. You know,
Yeah.
and
Give
that
me
was
this
totally legit.
obscure riddle of a statement. Sure, make it happen. I don't know. I'm scared. And it's like he
Yeah,
goes
exactly.
away,
Yeah, do what you got to do. You know, not realizing what he was, you know, saying. Right.
not
Yeah.
realizing that's basically the same sort of hand wave that got him to exist in the first
Yeah.
place.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think do you think there's room for like after seeing Lord of the Rings and then seeing these prestige television shows, it seems like there's room to get Arthur right, but they probably want like a novel set that they
Hmm.
can link to that like did most of the work for them or
Right.
has an existing popularity.
Hmm.
But do you I think that would be like really successful if they could land it right and they don't let the whoever produces it like get in the way of telling the tale in a way that tries to reflect, because I think that's something Peter Jackson did really well with those the first Lord of the Rings movies. Was you could tell he really cared about the topics, and you hear about how many times he had to like go to bat with his producers and his studio to get it the way he wanted versus the way producers kind of thought thought it needed to be.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
do you think that would be something that could be successful?
I do. And I think, you know, you could take it a couple different directions. You could do a straight up adaptation of Lamort. The issue there is, and this may be one of the reasons that it is not something that is more frequently attempted these days, is you're basically working with public domain characters, right? You don't it's not Marvel, it's not the Tolkien estate. Like you don't have licensing rights to Lancelot, you know. So I think one way to do it would be almost like how Pendragon does it, where you have original characters who are in this world. They're the focus characters, but they're
Right.
interacting with Arthur and Guinevere and Merlin and all these folks. You know, I think that that could be a way to go that might, you know, Hollywood interested, but, you know, kind of allow them to have their little franchise.
You need the merchandising, right?
Exactly. That's it. That's it. It's all about the trademarkable intellectual property, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and that makes sense. And that might be why we're seeing more sort of smaller movies and indie takes of it, is because,
Uh-huh.
indie can't go and buy those licenses. They need to find something in public domain to work with, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah, very much.
but, all right. Do you see what is the most promising thing of King Arthur you've seen in the last 10 years? Would you say it's the Green Knight?
I think The Green Knight was definitely the most engaging adaptation that I've seen. I'll fess up. I've not seen the Guy Ritchie Arthur movie. I can't bring myself to do it.
It's fair. I tried.
I know, right? I watched the
Yeah.
trailer, I read the plot synopsis, and I was like, no, I can't do this. I have a friend who will go to bat for that movie every time, and I respect he's every movie he's recommended to me, he's never steered me wrong, so I should probably watch it at some point. I just have to take off my, Arthurian fan cap and just view it as like a fantasy movie, I think. Um,
Yeah, I rank it just for myself, just slightly below King Arthur and the Knights of Justice, the one with the animated
yeah,
show with the football team.
you're right.
So
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and I think that that was an example of, I mean, because they wanted to make that into a franchise. They wanted that to be the next sort of like Marvel, you know, cinematic universe. So it didn't work because it was too it was too idiosyncratic, and I think it was too much, like what you're saying. It's like we need a Peter Jackson type figure who can hold the line against that kind of like attempt to just make an Arthur movie that feels like any other Hollywood, summer blockbuster. So yeah, I can't really count that one. And the Green Knight, I loved it for its audacity, you know.
Certainly leaned into more like the spiritual side and
Uh-huh.
everything that I think since 2020, or not since 2020, first century is what I mean.
Mm,
Like
mm.
everything we've seen with Arthur has been the exact opposite. It's been like pitched as like, see the real legend, or
Yeah.
like a Rome take, or we're always kind of trying to look at, like, it's almost like the fascination was Arthur a real figure in history,
Yeah.
and this is the story of what it might actually look like, because we know in the 5th and 6th century they weren't running around with plate mail. So
Yeah. Right.
right,
Exactly. Yeah. There's been a lot of that, sort of the Bernard Cornwell side of things. And, or, alternate takes like the Merlin series, like Arthur and Merlin are a couple of teenagers, and it's, that kind of thing. And it's really interesting because I feel like we're still in this like very reactive era of like kind of trying to deconstruct the round table in a lot of ways. And it's still in this conversation with Camelot the musical, with The Sword and the Stone. And these are movies that are so old at this point
right.
that who cares? Like it's we don't need to do that anymore. We can bring it back around, back to basics, and people would actually find that to be more fresh than, yet another gritty reboot, or, you know, it's Arthur and Merlin, but they're in space or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yep, and we'll just grab everyone. Vortigern's there, and
Yeah,
we'll just take everyone there at the same time.
right, right.
So
Vortigern's a cool name. Let's work that in.
yeah, right. Sounds villainous.
It sounds villainous, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. What are your thoughts, for as someone that's played a lot of Pendragon, you've written for Pendragon, you worked with Greg.
Mhm.
What are your insights for people on getting Arthur right, GMs specifically?
As a character, like
Yeah.
presenting him in the game.
Yeah, because obviously there's not a lot of time. Like, if you're doing it
Yeah,
the way that the game wants you to do it,
yeah,
he's often not with the players all the time. You know what I mean? He's not
yeah,
right
yeah,
beside them on a journey all the time. But how do you make those precious moments with him matter more? Or
yeah.
how do you get that right?
I think that's kind of what Greg was going for with the adventures that are in the starter set, because they're all very like you're right up there with Arthur.
Right
You're
there.
helping him directly establish his rule, and but no, you touched on it. I mean, you really you have to depict him as this kind of wholesome young man who's very idealistic. He's very like, I always like in the very earliest part, like 510, right? Battle of Carleon. King Lot shows up with his army. I always try to work in a scene that the player knights are witness to where Arthur is freaking out. Like suddenly this is very real, and he realizes how in over his head he is and that he might die today, and he's scared, and just show that vulnerability and then show that growth from that moment forward where he learns how to be a king, but he also is like, I'm going to be a different kind of king because I think, it's important for us to not just be warriors who beat the crap out of each other. We also have like a social obligation to everyone else in this society to uphold our end of the bargain. And also, we're in this like warrior fraternity basically. Um, we should treat each other with respect as well. And, kind of going on that journey, you don't have to have a lot of face time with him. You just have to see the effects of his leadership. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can hear from afar like the things he's doing, probably
Uh-huh.
less like slaying dragon and more, you know, like the good guy moves he's doing that are like,
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
he's not his dad. Okay, that's good.
He's not his dad. He's marrying for love, not for
Right.
lust and not for political advantage. He just fell in love with someone and he wants to marry her. Oh my
Yeah,
God, what is that?
exactly. We took we're taking a take on it. My friend reached out and he was looking for a little bit more gaming and such, and
Mhm.
I was like, where can I get him connected? And I realized, one of the ways, especially because we stream the game, right? I'm like, one of the ways I can depict Arthur a bit more is through his relationship with Kay. So I
Mhm.
have this player
Yeah.
playing Kay,
Oh, great.
and I thought that was, because the player is, we've worked a lot together as like co-GMs on things before, so I think it's
Mhm.
kind of the take. It's like a PC NPC, but a
Yeah.
lot of Pendragon is like roll to find out what your traits tell you your character's going to do in a lot of cases, anyways. At least that's one of my favorite parts of the game. So it's like, does it matter if it's an NPC or a PC if we're still rolling those dice at certain times? Like,
Right.
I think it,
Right.
I think it'll be fascinating. It landed pretty well in the first session, and I'm looking forward to more of that. But I think
Yeah.
there's
Sounds
different
promising.
ways. Yeah, we just through the timing of how long it took the players, because we started with 5.2,
Mhm.
went through. It took our players quite a while to have heirs,
Mhm.
and so all their heirs are teenagers. And when we
Mm,
played the
mm.
Crucible, I had Robert be like, "No, I'm going out there at this age, and you're all coming with me. Anyone who's brave enough to, right?" So,
Yeah.
and then he effectively like impulsively knighted them after anyone who survived it, right? And I thought that was, it's interesting because now they're young knights and they'll be young knights right beside Arthur, which is not 21-year-old knights. They'll be Arthur's age and knights.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Robert is in there as kind of an Arthur surrogate as well because he is also
Yep.
Arthur's age and, comes into his rule through not exactly illegitimate means, but he kind of, says, "Well, there's no king to make me count, so I'm making myself count." There. Now I'm the count of Salisbury,
Yep.
you know.
We
So,
we had because we were playing the Great Pendragon campaign through. We had one of the players end up being one of his favorites, and
uh,
this is played by Liam, who ran the short clergy game with us there, Open the
mhm.
Gates. But this character was not the person that should have been a role model for Robert. He was a We were using the fan rules for True Knight, so people could lean into that, and it was sort of the might makes right,
Yeah.
Arthurian Knight.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and Robert's certainly become a certain way because of that, and it's fun to see how um, influence of the knights can lead into how the squires grow up and how they're raised, or how certain parents like Morgause can can make the kids a certain way too.
Yep. Yep.
But
Yeah, and I mean, this is the thing. I mean, to bring it back to media adaptations, I mean, people don't even know what they're missing out on because there's so many characters and there's so many plot threads and different directions you could choose to focus on. So, there's a reason the Prince Valiant comic ran for decades, right? Because it was just, I mean, that's another example where you have this original character who's the focal point character who's at King Arthur's court, and so he's interacting with all of these legendary figures.
And that's another good point. Like there are a lot of characters, but we've kind of proven all these models exist and worked. Like it's
Hmm.
like, oh, there's too many characters. Did you watch or read Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones? Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
people won't get the hero journey. It's like, well, we kind of saw it with Aragorn, right? Like,
yep,
and Frodo and Sam.
yeah, absolutely.
Talking about like Camelot, 'cause we haven't really talked about that at all. What do you think? You talked about Camelot the musical.
Yeah,
What do you think gets missed or misinterpreted the most about Camelot in these modern takes?
I think Camelot is kind of like, when you say Camelot, I think that does conjure up for people this image of perfection, this kind of like shining city, this perfect city, which, is both good. I mean, it's kind of cool to have that as the sort of the heart of the kingdom for most of, Arthur's reign. Um, it also does typify this idea of like these characters exist in this like perfect world and everything is great and wonderful, which it kind of is for a little while, like you have the romance period and the tournament period and like, the questing knights and the kingdom of adventure and all that other, good stuff. But sort of the lesson, the takeaway from that is that eventually it starts to feed in on itself, the rivalries and the jealousies and the secrets, so really Camelot actually stands for that kind of classic image of, sort of like externalized image of perfection that actually sits upon this foundation of darkness, of lies and deceit, so it's in that sense, it is like what we've been talking about here, this theme of like people dismiss Arthurian legends for being overly simplistic when in fact they're very sophisticated and complex.
Absolutely. Because we talked quite a bit about Excalibur and we both started there. By Excalibur, I mean John Borman's movie. Do you think that's the closest we've gotten to like a gold standard movie for the Arthurian legend?
uh
Or what's your closest?
I mean, it would kind of have to be, it is flawed for sure, but I mean, I rewatched it not too long ago for the umpteenth time, and it's
Right?
still a very stirring movie. It's
Mhm.
very, considering how he condenses all of L'Amour d'Arthur down into a 2 hour. I think it's just 2 hours. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not even like a 3 hour movie, right?
No.
It's a feature length movie of the time of the era,
One third of Zack Snyder's Justice
right?
League.
Right, exactly. um considering he's able to distill the essence of that narrative down into a 2 hour movie, it's pretty impressive. But it's also pretty dated. I do love, from a kind of kitsch standpoint, but just completely over the top, sort of like 70s aesthetic of it all. Right.
Yeah,
It's so like almost tacky in places,
totally.
but I think that was kind of the point. He was kind of trying to show this like decadence of the kingdom, right? So, but I could see like a younger person maybe watching it today and being like, wow, this is really corny, even though it's also very intense. So, but it is still, for me personally, the gold standard for sure.
Yeah. We sat down and watched a react. So I sat down with Eric Vulgaris and AP
Yeah.
Gaming Rail to do it. And Eric said, Eric and I have watched it several times
Hmm.
separately. Arthur's never seen it. AP Gaming Rail's never seen it. And so his react was a lot of a criticism of it. And
Hmm.
let's just say, if you're ever making a react video, my advice is, unless you want to stir the pot,
Yeah.
like the thing you're reacting to, or just don't post it because
Yeah.
people get really bad when they watch react videos mostly to see you like the things they like, right?
That's true.
So,
Yeah. Good point.
but one of the comments he made that I thought was fascinating is the joust between Arthur and Lancelot, the
Mm.
fight there. He
Yeah.
said that almost plays out like a Chinese like what do you call those novels? Like it feels like that, like the epic, those two warriors meeting in this
Yeah.
place and then having this out and it's all dramatic and I don't know. There was a lot of cool takes in the movie and just the filming of it that are definitely dated, like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And I, it's so sad that they lost the original audio or whatever and had to redub over it because that
Yeah.
gives it a extra level of corny at times, but
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
it still was ahead of its time. I just don't think it's timeless, It's harder for a new person to watch that and get anything out of it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But, I think you can definitely take clips of some of the better sequences, like the fight between Arthur and Lancelot, and show that to somebody and still get a good reaction out of them, even if maybe the movie itself holistically would not elicit that same response, So in that sense, it's a great sort of ambassador, you know.
Uh, Well, I don't want to keep you all night. I appreciate the conversation and you taking the time to do this.
Of course.
Before I call it a night, I just wanted to see if you have anything you want to shout out or mention.
I just want to mention that we're pretty excited. We've got a lot of Pendragon products in the pipeline for next year, and we're going to be publishing the Noble's Handbook finally, early or not early next year, but in the first half of next year. I don't have a specific date, obviously.
That'll cover the land owning and stuff, I imagine.
Covers land ownership. It covers playing at the baronial level if you're into that sort of thing. It's got expanded equipment list. It's got expanded family stuff, if you really want to get into your family. It's got rules for making player ladies. So it's just, it kind of finishes off that core trilogy of books. And I like it a lot. I think it's going to be a good one. So,
Nice.
and we're just in the process of, speaking of the Boy King, we're in the process of commissioning art and laying out the first volume in the new edition of the Great Pendragon campaign, which is going to be probably called The Boy King, covering the Boy King and conquest periods.
And for those that have bought into adventures that kind of walk through those same years,
Mhm.
um, just, because Boy King is where the starter set starts and then, you
Mhm.
know, kind of goes from there.
Yep.
Uh, is there linkages? Are there like one thing I thought was fantastic you guys did was the Crucible and King's Gambit. It's very like here's how you can weave in and out of these other published things that either exist or are going to. Like,
Yeah.
is there that kind of weaving
Very
for
much
players?
so. Very much
Okay.
so. And there's even a little section like here's how you can use this book with the core books. Here's how you can use this book with the starter set. If you started with the starter set, you just picked up this book. So, we want to make it as user friendly as possible for everybody.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, David. Thanks for taking the time to do this. And for those watching, we'll be back next week with a topic I have yet to decide. So we'll see you then. Yeah.
All right.
Take
Thanks
care.
for having me again.
Yeah.
Thanks.